Today on the podcast, we have Michel May. Michel is the CEO of Anzen Health and the co-founder, along with his wife Misa, of Aizome, where they create bedding out of fibers and dyes that, get this, not only don't harm us, but actually have the ability to heal us. And you guys, this company is making waves in the textile world. They have been featured on Forbes, South by Southwest, and they even won the 7th most creative brand in the world. Over Google, I might add. And the People's Voice Webby over Coca-Cola. Can I just say, if you listen to this podcast, you are going to walk away knowing more than almost anyone else in the world knows about textiles. Because it's hardly talked about, which is wild because you and I both wear clothes all day long and sleep on bedding made out of the same stuff. This podcast is going to be super helpful because Michel and I get into the weeds on why we should care about what's in our clothes, the history, and also the regulation or lack thereof of clothing. But perhaps most importantly, we really get into the details on how to help your family and yourself make better choices when it comes to clothing. Buckle up. This is quite an episode, chock full of very important information. And with that, Michel, welcome to the Hannah Dunning Project. A really fundamental and basic question to ask you, kind of going all the way back to when your journey first started, is why should the average person care what's in our fabric?
Well, there is a concept, or people think sometimes that the things on your skin, on your body, they don't matter because we don't eat them. But if it's in you, it's on you. And this is, understood for a very long time that there's something called dermal transportation. That's the way how nicotine patches works. A lot of atopic or a lot of topic medicine is applied to the skin and then absorbed. And there's a study, I think back from the 70s with children's PJs. I have to look up the name. I think Cuts. I might be wrong, but if you look for children's PJ studies from the 70s, you'll find it, where they basically studied that if kids wear pajamas, like treated pajamas, flame retardant treated pajamas, after one night, all the chemicals can be found in there. Not all, but a lot of chemicals can be found in the urine. So they go through the system, and a lot of those stay in our system. And a lot of chemicals used in the production of textiles are, a little bit like cancer cells. It's not necessarily the amount. You just need to be unlucky enough that once one of these molecules or one of these chemicals finds its right way somewhere in your organism to cause lasting damage. There are a lot of things that we can do that greatly reduce your risk. That a lot of has to be done, and it's a conversation, it's moving stuff forward, but there's practical things that people can do right now, tomorrow, that will reduce their risk by a lot on being exposed to these chemicals. So there's a reason directly for your health, and it can be your health or the health of your children, and it can be just from preventing skin irritation, but it can also be for preventing long-term problems. If you, for example, damage your skin biome, so skin biome, we can talk about this later a bit more in detail, but skin biome basically means a healthy skin, where you have a balance of the right amount of bacteria that we want to have on your skin. If you damage your skin biome, it can, for some people, it can take a lifetime to repair that. It can sometimes just never be repaired. And a damaged skin biome is a pathway to a lot of other diseases because your skin cannot defend against things, chemicals, bacteria, things that it usually can defend. So a healthy skin is really also a symbol of a healthy person or a healthy organism. I think we often find, healthy skin very attractive. Maybe that's something that probably deep in our DNA we associate with being healthy. And if you have unhealthy skin, I think we often feel like, I'm not looking, I don't feel well, I don't look well. And there is something to it. So Yeah, and the fact is, unfortunately, as it is right now, is that textiles fall under this huge exemption where everything that is a treatment doesn't have to be known by the manufacturer, doesn't have to be known by the brand. And there's no law that you know. Actually, I don't think it's designed on purpose like this, but by accident, it's designed even with an incentive for brands not to know, because you only have to regulate dangers that you are aware of. If you're not aware
Mm,
of any dangers in your textiles, you don't have to regulate it.
mm,
Talk later about the PFAS case where this was, where they basically knew and then did some regulation.
mhm,
And then the lawyers probably told them, if you make any regulations, then it means you know. So they stopped, they had like they realized that pregnant women in their factory working in a specific department had a lot of birth defects. And then
mhm.
they said, oh, maybe they shouldn't work there. And the lawyer said, like, that's really dangerous. You do that, you're liable. So, and then they went to Parliament, like, all right, cool. Then no more regulations. Everybody can work anywhere. So, and this is the state where we are right now. And I think it's for our personal health, but in long term, it's also for the environment. And I mean, it's massively also for the people that make textiles,
Mhm,
because they are exposed to this a lot.
mhm,
And yeah, so I feel that's why people should care about this. And organic textiles is not just the next wave of organic and greenwashing, even though that's unfortunately something that happens a lot right now, greenwashing, which is why it's really hard to put sensible conversation forward. Everybody will jump on it and go like, oh yeah, we have whatever, recycled PET bottle, blah, 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 whatever, low impact dyes or plant-based, whatever it is. And I think, for a curious mind, it is also just a really interesting fact. How did we get here? Like, why are we, why are, you know, companies don't want to poison you, right? It doesn't make any sense. The government doesn't actively want to poison us, right? It doesn't make any sense where we are. And it's very interesting to kind of realize how we got here. And it's also interesting to realize, I think, that it's not lost. Like we are just starting to understand that medical
mhm,
understanding is advancing. I think probably 20 years ago, very few people would have known that how strong, textiles can affect your long-term health, and how the understanding of a biome is also pretty new, gut
mhm.
biome or skin biome. So I think it's also a very interesting topic.
Yeah, I think you said that beautifully and pulled in so many different factors that do matter, like not just our health, but the workers' health, and then on a global scale, what it's doing to our world. And I want to know what you think about this because in a lot of my conversations with people, it's really easy to go really negative really fast simply because of the sheer amount of scary information we now are starting to get, to your point with modern day science and technology. And I think there are some bad actors, and I want to make that clear. For example, DuPont, right? When we're talking about pregnant women on factory lines where they know that there's PFAs in something, their scientists have figured out that this is doing really bad things, and then they keep the women on the line later down. Like, there's a lot of bad actors, yes. But I want to know what you think about how fast we started moving with technology, specifically in the 50s when we started introducing synthetics to the market, because we had scientists from after World War II who had been fully solely focused on creating materials for wartime and then transitioned those materials to the average everyday person. And it kind of became a race to the moon, essentially. And actually, it was that, right? When the United States started racing the USSR to try to take a man to the moon, that's when I think technology kind of took off faster than our wisdom could in terms of what we're creating purely just to beat everyone else on functionality. Do you think what we're experiencing now is sort of the residual effects of wanting to be the best regardless of what that meant? Or
Yeah. To the point with the technical race, I think, I also don't like to think of, the world being influenced by bad actors. We don't know the effects of the things that we are doing. And a lot of things just happen because, we just don't know any better, and we do it one way or the other way. And I think there are cases where you can actually point out that somebody has done something willfully wrong for profit. And of course, that's something in our society. Unfortunately, we see a lot that people choose profit over the well-being of other people. But I don't think that this is the majority of what got us here. I think the majority is us not understanding any better. And I can give you a specific historic example, which I think, textiles is really fascinating in that sense that in 1880, in 1850 actually, the US overtook India as the largest producer of cotton. And still a lot of the wealth that we enjoy in America is based on 100 years of, I think 80 years of being the biggest cotton exporter in the world. And this built up, all the big cities in the US. A lot of the industry came from, being a dominant exporter of cotton to the world. The English Empire was basically the biggest producer of textile dyes. All of these dyes were produced in colonies far away. It's very cumbersome to manage a colony on the other side of the world, expensive, but all these dyes were mostly plant dyes. Up to like 1880, 1890 were plant dyes, most of them at least. And it was sort of the invention of chemistry to find out we don't need, to suppress a people on the other side of the planet. We can make these colors here at home. And Germany, before the First World War, became extremely good and suddenly making all these synthetic colors, along in Germany without any understanding or with very little understanding of the environmental damage. And, with very little understanding of how sick, people got in factories. And at the end of the First World War, most of these machineries were moved from Germany to the UK that basically said, we actually have no much need anymore to have these colonies. We can make all these things here, which part of the decolonization was also, it was economically didn't make any sense anymore to keep colonies on the other side. So you could even make the point that the invention of, petrochemical, magic, was a good thing for the world. And I feel like, there's many ways of telling that story. And where you don't just look at good and bad. But I feel, it is basically alongside the regulation of the EPA, once I think you cannot claim anymore that you don't.
And my whole question for companies is, if you're claiming to make a good product, how do you not know? Like I'm just confused because I talk to all these small businesses, especially who are on the front lines. They've visited their manufacturer in person. They've seen how things work. They're putting hours, countless hours, into the quality of their fabric and materials. So I find it impossible from a consumer standpoint to wrap my head around the idea that these big companies with endless pockets don't know. I think we can agree we should hold them accountable, right? Like they have to know, right?
Yeah, I think probably the mantra in these companies is always, don't make perfect the enemy of better. So they're saying, oh, we do better. And, Oekotex, GTS, these are all symbols of better, right? But the thing that drives me nuts is, you should admit that it's a step. And actually, it's also a fairly low bar, which I think is also important to say. It's a low bar, and frankly, this should be the lowest bar legal, in my opinion. And none of these certifications prevent the usage of plastics, of polyester, of synthetic dyes. They just want to have some kind of regulation in place. It doesn't mean that the textiles are biodegradable, and it doesn't even mean that there are no PFAS in there. It just means, there have been taken safety measures to decrease the likelihood and, to check for some chemicals. Maybe a good example is, I'm German, so I can shit on German car makers. So, like BMW or Benz, they have, you could say, wow, what they've done. They made people mobile. They brought them from A to B. They make the car so cheap that everybody owns a car. All right, great story. Fantastic. But I think that since probably the 90s or 80s or 90s, there have been people who invented electric engines and went to these companies and said, hey, I have an electric engine. And I think these companies were actively saying, why should we change anything? It doesn't work. How would, where would you charge? And people can't really do, oh, okay, go away, And I think it's very telling that it had to be a complete outsider in that industry with immense capital that just changed this industry, that now BMW, Benz, they all make electric engines. And I think that is similar to what you have in the textile industry. They have very big supply chains built, and they're all profiting immensely from the fact that we don't know what's in there. And up to probably very high levels in these companies, they also don't know and don't want to know. They know the fact that our clothes are full of plastic. And I always say synthetic color is also plastic. It's made from the same things as plastic. So even if they sell you an organic cotton t-shirt and whatever, print a tree on it, it is not a tree. It's not made from plants entirely, and it has a large degree of things that just behave like plastic. So that's just how I think that it is just such a monster of an industry that it's just really difficult to change that, especially with the kind of legacy companies that own the supply chain, that own the marketing, that own the fashion shows, that own all these like sustainability organizations. Our company has had very little success with any like sustainability councils or whatever it is. I just feel like there is no there is no understanding that we have to change this industry fundamentally from the beginning. Like we have to go back in time 120 years ago when we started making everything from oil and said like, oh, great, it's easy, and go back like, no, how can we do that actually different also with our understanding of what damage we are causing, and also how does it affect the people that wear these textiles.
I think that point is an important one because we can feel it. We can feel the ripple effects of being so far gone all the way down to the household consumer like myself. Because when I consider that this is an oil problem, this is a fundamental problem from 120 years ago, immediately your brain wants to check out and say, whoop, that's too big, that's too much, I can't handle that. And it's interesting to hear that all the way up in the industry with these regulatory agencies or councils who have literally been put together in an effort or under the name of sustainability are saying the same thing almost of like, oh, this is too much. It's too big. We can't do that. We can't peel back the trillion-dollar, multi-trillion-dollar oil industry. So let's call it sustainability and scramble to do what we can instead. I almost kind of get that. That's kind of the feeling going on here, instead of attacking the root cause of the issue, almost like with our health today, right? It's you can't slap a Band-Aid on it. I know this is going to take the conversation in a way different place, and I'm going to pull it right back to where we were. But, it's kind of like the Ozempic thing going on right now. And you can argue there's a group of people who need Ozempic. They have diabetes or extreme health scenarios, whatever. But the average American doesn't need Ozempic. They need a better diet, exercise, and other things fundamentally first, right?
I think what we also have to acknowledge is we live in a weird time where consumerism and profits are put above the safety of the consumer, and this is literally what's happening. What is happening is it's up to the consumer to prove that something isn't unhealthy, and it's not up to the company to make sufficient safety checks and saying this is safe. And my background is actually not textiles; it's medical devices and healthcare. And I think we live in a time too where it's like, because of how the system, and I'm not gonna talk too much about capitalism or consumerism, but it is better it makes more capitalist sense to let you get very sick and then pay for an expensive treatment than to take better care of your health. The companies will not advertise that. They'll not say live healthily. That's maybe people like you who take their time to educate people. And so with a lot of a lot of things that we see in our world. And I mean, food is the same. We know, I give you an example too. We know that 90% of Parkinson disease is not genetic. It is from, known chemicals used in the pesticide industry. And despite we know it, there are several exemptions for whatever. One weird reason is for fishing industries in lakes where people swim and they also have game fish. You can still use these chemicals and only have a 24-hour period where humans are not allowed to go to the lake. But it's besides the point. I mean, it's just saying we'll put often profit before safety, and that's the world we live in, and that's something we will not change easily, but we have to be aware of that. Just because a company tells you something and because the market tells you something, maybe even YouTube or whatever, like, it doesn't have to be that way. At the end of the day, there's always a strong incentive to selling you something, and a lot of our medicine, and that's what also drives up the cost of healthcare, is treatment focused, not prevention focused. And prevention is something that, I think you were talking a lot about this, and I have a daughter as well. And, for me, she's going to be 1 year next Monday. That is something where you once, especially when you're a parent, you go like, I want you to not be sick.
At the end of the day, it's just kind of like a game of chicken, right? I don't know if you played that when you're a kid, but it's like you go to a busy street, or that game Frogger, right? There's a busy street and everyone's kind of in a contest to see if they can get the frog across, or who's going to get killed first in terms of like playing the game of chicken. I just feel like we're there. And I think it's foolish to assume that even if we created a regulatory agency, because let's just make this very clear. Today, we do not have an overarching regulatory agency for textiles, which is mind-blowing. That's mind-blowing. That is so insane, to your point, because of what we're now discovering, but also because we live in our clothes almost 24/7. That's insane. But let's set that aside and let's just say and agree that that's ridiculous. And then let's talk about, even if we did put a regulatory agency in place, look how far that's gotten us today with regulatory agencies. They serve a purpose. There's been countless times where a regulatory agency, and I'll just zero in on the United States because that's where I live, there's been timeless accounts of them saving our butts, okay? There have been time after time where they've kept a medical device or a pill or a procedure from entering into the market, and they have their purpose. Without them, it's the wild, wild west, which is essentially what's going on in textiles. That aside, we can't rely on that either, because we are, to your point, we're a train that's been let loose, and the brakes aren't working, okay? It's not going to stop anytime soon. Unfortunately, the burden is on the consumer. It shouldn't be. It should be on the companies creating these products from a moral standpoint first, but actually from an economical standpoint in the long run, because eventually these people are going to have to stop what they're doing, eventually. And then they've created, to your point, this entire network, this entire system on a foundation that's faulty. It's not going to be good long run. It's not a good financial choice. But at the end of the day, I'm a mom. I'm at home. I'm into this world deep, and I'm understanding how important our clothes are. What can I do just as an everyday individual to try to keep my family from being exposed to these things? In your opinion, like, what do you do for your family knowing all this information?
Yeah, you said so many good things, and I'm going to answer your question, but I actually feel like always like I'm not in the textile industry because I never intended to be in the textile industry, but like I really like healthcare, and I think it's really great doing something that impacts the health of people. But I guess for like 7 or 8 years, I'm now definitely in textiles. And what you said is that word, I've heard that so often on like trade shows or speaking, whatever, with people in dye factories, is textiles is the Wild West. I've heard this expression so many times because it literally is so crazy. All the things that are allowed in textiles. Like, we've had people at trade shows, they just ask, so what do you want in the made in label? We're like, like, what do you mean? Like, country, what should we write on it? There's no, like, you can write on anything that you want. And you can write, when it comes to 100% cotton, if it's 100% polyester and you're 100% cotton, there is no punishment for that. At max, you might get a letter, or you may have a consumer calling you. There's no financial punishment. There's an artist, there's a Dutch artist who did an exhibition in Chicago where she took the labels next to like the lab content test, and it was like 1 in 4 is just wrong. And she just took random textiles, and there's no regulation. You can just do that, right? And the label as a whole that people think it's an ingredient label. It's not. It's not meant to have the ingredients in there. It's a trade label to show the customs officer how to tax the product. That is the purpose, plus the washing instructions for you. But it's not meant at that. So it's this, and you were saying there's no regulatory oversight. That's true. It has been in the beginning. I think I have to look it up again. I think in the 20s or 30s, it basically was decided that this is outside of the reach of different agencies. And then when the FTC and the EPA and the FDA were founded, just like textiles, was just a $3.7 trillion exemption that just doesn't need any regulation. And it's absolutely it's so mad and so weird, and it has been going on for such a long time. And just a point to the FDA. So I do think the FDA does a lot of great things, and the FDA has definitely a lot of highly intelligent people working there, and it's very unfortunately that under George W. Bush, they made this proposal that they get some of the funding from pharmaceutical companies, and right now 70% of the funding of the FDA is coming from pharmaceutical companies. And it's, a friend of mine has been saying it's a little bit like you ask the bank robbers to pay for the police, the salaries for the police officers, which has created a lot of unfortunate things in oncology and other areas where good medicine should be put forward. And I've been on the sidelines of amazing medical breakthrough things that just died because of insurance, because of FDA, because of things that shouldn't be, and there are people out there who would need that treatment. That is part of the world in healthcare. But I just want to go back and say, like, the FDA I still think it has a lot of highly intelligent people that work there. So which is why when we applied to the FDA and said, like, please regulate us, they were like, hang on, people usually don't want to be regulated by us. So I was like, no, but
I want to talk about that. You guys,
please.
like, this is, and we can go back to what the everyday person can do in a bit, because I think this is actually going to answer a lot of it, to be frank, with finding companies like Aizome. I know the background of Aizome, but can you tell the listener, there's so much to cover in a loaded question, like, what do you guys do? What are you doing? But I think the fact, and I really want to zoom in on the fact that you are actively going to the FDA and asking them, please regulate us.
Exactly.
Can you start there?
So my colleague Karen has decades of experience working in healthcare and decontamination of buildings and areas. She worked a lot on the anthrax cases, and she's done a lot of co-chair of environmental groups with the government. And she said, like, she found it kind of weird that they would lock down a hospital for formaldehyde. They would clean the hospital, and the day they open it, formaldehyde was going in the front door on the products that people were wearing. It's just like so weird. Like, we just literally shut this down. And how come these like dangerous chemicals can be unregulated in certain products? And so she started working with us for a year and has had a massive impact, because I've always had this feeling, let's go to the FDA and say, regulate us, because there's a huge patient population out there. There's probably 40 million Americans that have chronic skin issues or more, that have no choice in products to choose safer products for skin. Like, the label doesn't tell you anything. And, the Oekotex or GTS, that level, as I said, is too low. So we basically, for us, it's important, to fully know the ingredients that we're using, and then to also use only natural ingredients and no petrochemicals. And, not even a threat, not even a little bit, not even a final treatment or anything. So that's one of the, requirements you need to have when you work when you're a medical device. You need to fully understand how your product is made. You need to have very strict controls, who makes it, audits. You can be audited at any time. So for us, doing that step, going to the FDA, was basically saying, we have something that you should regulate. And they basically said, well, why don't you speak to the FTC? And we're like, no, the FTC doesn't care, right? They don't care. So that's that is why our textiles are compliant with class 1 medical device, with the medical device regulation. And that's, basically, as I said, it was the FDA was just really surprised that we want to be regulated. But again, I feel like these regulations aren't actually that strict. I mean, it comes down to if somebody experience a rash or whatever, I should be able in my documents to go back and saying, oh, they had batch 747. 747, we maybe contracted some other factory and maybe something else was used. I mean, it's sensible, right? That should be done for any textile product that your children are wearing or you are wearing. But that just isn't the case. So I think we basically, by having these very strict understanding of how we make our clothes, we think FDA regulation for us makes sense.
Let's dive into Aizome, because the people need to know what the heck's going on here, because what your guys, I mean, this is huge. It's huge.
My background is I've had my first job as an in-house consultant in a company that makes radiotherapy software, and was called basically it's Google Maps for the brain, neurosurgery software, so that neurosurgeons, when they do operations, that they know where to cut and where not to cut. And that was my introduction to healthcare, and I thought it's such an amazing company to work for. They're called Brain Lab. They're headquartered in Munich, and I had an extremely amazing time working that and just seeing what's possible if smart people come together. And there was something that happened at the same time. My mother got diagnosed with a glioblastoma, so that's an incurable cancer, and had to undergo chemotherapy. And that chemotherapy, she started to react to the bed sheets that she was in. And the oncologist said, oh, sometimes that's the color. And it's the first time I've ever heard about somebody mentioning color. I've never thought about the ingredient color in a textile. And that sort of led to, well, we switched it out, and then these like black spots disappeared. And later I was researching that and just thinking, how weird is that we have an ingredient in our textile that our immune system always has to defend against. So even if I'm healthy, does it mean like 20% of my immune system or whatever has to constantly fight against that? And if I'm compromised, I can't defend. So I thought that's really weird. And I lived in Japan for many years, and in Japan, one of the first dates I did with my now wife was we went to a traditional dyer, and I thought it's fascinating how they really think of plants not just as color but as having medicinal properties that are transferred into textiles. And they said like, yeah, that's just how people used to make textiles. You would just think this textile, somebody will sweat a lot, so you want to use indigo because it's antibacterial, it's killing off the sweat, and it's very good for the skin, and it's very good for children too because it's working with their skin to build up a healthier skin. And I was like, well, if even half of that is true, then how stupid are we that we took something out that is medicinal and replaced it with something that comes from, waste product of the petroleum industry. And that kind of started sort of the whole thing. And I spent a lot of nights researching, downloading Google Scholar papers, and just reading like who's working on this and what's the level of science right now. And it just came to a point where I just felt like I can't let it go anymore. And that's not going to happen in my company. Because we do late stage treatments and not prevention. And then I basically started my company. In the beginning we made a video and we put it on Indiegogo and Kickstarter, and we said like, hey, this is the concept of our. And I was also thinking, well, if nobody cares, then maybe it will die here. But actually, a lot of people cared. We got a lot of people that bought our products, and then we actually had to make them, had to ship them, had to create a company, had to calculate tax rates. And, at the end, we basically worked for 2 years. We got $130,000 and we worked for 2 years. And after we shipped out, I think 1,000 bed sheets to like from Fiji to Tasmania to like all around the world, Saudi Arabia. We basically, no more money left. We maybe have calculated this wrong. But we do see there is a market. We do see we can produce these things. And it also showed me, because in the beginning I approached big textile companies and they told us, nice story, bro. Nobody cares. And even if somebody would care, you can't do it. You cannot die with plants, you can't do it. So this can't do it, I basically had disproved because we could do it. And the market thing, I kind of felt I also disproved there seem to be enough people that care. And the next thing was we got, one of our Indiegogo customers basically said, I see what you're doing. I want to invest money. And I was like, oh, crazy. So we had an angel investor, right? Literally an angel. If you're listening, you're an angel. So he came and gave us money. And then we could continue, working. And we tried out marketing. So we wasted, unfortunately, a lot of his money on like a Facebook advertisement and things like this that didn't work. But at the same time, we continued, always. My idea was to have an e-commerce shop where people can buy products that we made in our process. But at the same time, we focus a lot on the science. We have basically, we have to understand the science better. We have to make tests. Eventually we have to patent. We have to, not just understand the prevention part, but also the treatment part. We see, all right, it's antimicrobial. Is it antimicrobial in a good way? Is it antimicrobial in a bad way? Like this, everything gets a bit more complicated. And we now, I think we're at a stage where the shop is going well. We've lots of customers and we've a high number of repeat customers, which is really great. And we have a lot of like research now that is just solid enough, so we can actually work with grants from the government to really, say there's something here, and
Wow.
we'll, get funding to really make science that hasn't been done before, and also kind of compiling all the understanding that we have from why textiles are bad. So how are they bad? Why are they bad? Because like a lot of things are like you say it, and you maybe quote some research somewhere, and then people feel like, yeah, but maybe not. And then the treatment part, I think, is also super interesting because we've done research. We've a peer-reviewed study together with researchers from the University of Cambridge. Like indigo is amazing in accelerating wound healing. Why? Of course, we went to Nature, said like, hey, you got to publish our paper. And they were like, can you explain the mechanism? We're like, no, but maybe somebody else, but we can show that it works. But so, I mean, there's more science to be done to understand how these things work. But I think I'm super excited of what's ahead, and I'm very excited that we have so much support now. And for me, it's important to keep the company going where right now you can buy bed sheets, and in a year from now, we want to do healthwear, so clothes that you can wear. And at the same time advance the research. And in a few years, maybe 1 or 2 years, I want to do something, like basically the Gore-Tex of healing fabrics,
Oh, so
with different
epic.
with different chemicals than Gore-Tex, but as a licensing model. Because what we do is you don't need extremely expensive machines. A lot of it is retrofit. And a
Mm.
lot of it is understanding plant chemistry. It's a lot of it is understanding the process, and it is not more expensive than synthetic and dyeing, which is one of the things that people always in the industry fear. Oh, what if it costs 1 cent more?
You guys are the people's hero and pretty much the rest of the industry's worst nightmare. Because, frankly, what you're showing here is that, yes, not only are these textiles and fabrics dangerous, but you can actually flip it on its head and make them helpful, which is what you've just told us. And I dumbed it down way, way, way down because smart people like yourself can speak science all day long. With the average person like me, you're basically getting rid of the excuse that these big companies have, which is, oh, we don't know, because you're going deep into the know and doing the science behind it. And it's fascinating. And frankly, I think the reason why Aizome, your company, and people like yourself matter, besides just being incredible humans, but matter to the average everyday person, is because we don't really know what to do. Because we walk into a store, in any neighborhood, in any area, and we can barely find one cotton shirt. it's almost impossible to walk in physically anywhere and buy something that's from a natural fiber. So it kind of leaves you with the question of, well, what do I do? We're so far gone. I walk upstairs in my closet and 90% of it is polyester. What do I do? I care. I just don't know next steps. And my answer to them is do what you can. So the next time you buy a piece of clothing, try and buy the right thing, but also support a business who's actually out there walking the walk. And that would be you guys. Because if I buy a thing of bed sheets, a set of bed sheets from you, not only am I, of course, impacting my health today and the health of my children today, but I'm also then investing in research to hopefully pave way for more options in the future, more understanding, more awareness. So that's always my answer is do what you can today and be very cognizant of what companies you are supporting, because there's never been a more important time to vote with your dollar and thus help businesses like Aizome do the thing, because you guys are out there doing it all the way to the point where I want to hear more about this, because this really blows my mind. And frankly, this is when I first heard of Aizome. When I saw this, I was like, I had to pull my husband from downstairs and be like, read this, because you guys are taking wastewater from your clothing process. And what are you doing with the wastewater?
So one of the things that I think is so weird in today's world is that the colors and a lot of the chemicals in our textiles are a waste product of the petroleum industry. And whenever they talk so much about performance, blah, 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 it's marketing of they have a very cheap source of making those things. By the way, petroleum is probably the most subsidized industry in the world. So that's why all these things are also so cheap. And we basically thought, hey, how do we actually explain in a cool, artsy way how we're different? And when you work with a plant dyer, anybody who's done plant dyeing at home knows that. And if you imagine somebody just using plant sludge and then dye, you end up with sludge, and this is good fertilizer. You can put this on the fields or whatever. It's just water. You can dip your finger in it or anything. Like there's nothing unhealthy in there. So we thought like, hey, if our plants have medicinal benefits, our textile have medicinal benefits, maybe there's also something in the dye, in the wastewater. And then we, did some testing, and we got, it still has this it has still this antibacterial property. It somehow has this ability, which we don't fully understand. It's something to do with tryptophan in there that accelerates wound healing. So it would make a great skin lotion. It makes a great cosmetic ingredient for skin lotion. And then we said, let's do that. Let's package it. Let's make it really fancy. Make it like a high, expensive, luxury skin lotion product, and just say, hey, here's our waste. Put it in your face.
It's marketing genius, frankly. I do want to ask you as a dad. You said your daughter's going to be 1 next week.
Yeah.
So fun. The best age. What do you do for her? I'm assuming she's sleeping on indigo sheets right now.
Yeah.
What do you do for clothing, and how do you go about finding stuff for her, since you guys don't have baby clothes, right?
Yeah, we don't. So, we don't have baby clothes, and I can tell you that we are always interested to, we have a lot of conversation with investors and people that are interested in expanding what we're doing. We want to keep 100% integrity. So, but we are interested in doing things like baby clothes and, whatever, bras and other things. But we have to do it, in a proper way. So we are not doing currently baby clothes, but I think it would be an absolutely great product. And I'm happy if people stayed on this conversation and enjoy the sort of the ramblings and the going into different realms. But there are actually really concrete things that you can do right now that will greatly reduce risk. So the biggest risk from textiles comes from new textiles. And that's, I would say, I don't know, the dirty secret nobody wants you to know. But of course, when you buy something new, it still has a lot of these chemicals, affluent chemicals that wash out easily, that are absorbed easier. The safer option are always older clothes. There's a a very famous, I think very famous, an amazing researcher. I'm not affiliated with him, but I think he's absolutely great and it's fantastic work. Dr. Ian Miles, also an employee from the state government, who has this really interesting hypothesis. It's like, how come eczema is so much more prevalent in older siblings? There's no good answer for it, other than probably older siblings get new clothes and younger siblings get hand-me-downs.
Wow.
And he focused a lot of diisocyanates, a compound that we use in mice in labs to induce eczema, which is used a lot in the production of textiles. So you can do a lot. So, and one thing is be very selective about buying clothes in general. That's the total anti-consumerist messaging. Like the less new stuff you buy, the less exposure you have through your textiles. When you buy new things, number one is obviously make sure that it's something that you will wear for a long time, because if you have to replace it, you'll have to buy something new again. So make sure it's something that you use for a long time and wash it twice. It sounds crazy, and maybe sometimes, the smell of new clothes, I don't know. When I was a kid, I really liked the smell at the gas station too. My mother always said, that's not healthy. But like, there's something, the smell of new clothes, that we like it, but it's not good for you. And it's not just the smell, it is also what you absorb. So new clothes, most danger comes from new clothes. And the people at most risk are these people that promote these shopping hauls, and just buy a lot of crap, very cheap crap, wear it once, send it back. If those people go to a doctor and get a toxicological profile, they are full of, all the bad guys, PFAS, and, whatever you want to check for. It's all in these young people particularly. So new clothes are literally the number one source that puts you at danger. And that's something that you can do, especially with kids. Like our kids, another one in the way I wanted to say kids, but not yet. Our kid and soon our kids, we don't almost have no new clothes. And if we get something new that we want to keep, we just wash it at least, twice before we use it. So that is something you can do. Also, when you have children and you see them chewing on things, like we have a carrier and she's always chewing on the carrier. I love the carrier, it's very good, but I always have a piece of cloth between the part where she chews on. And I actually quite often see kids that have like sort of the skin is infected, and I'm always, the weird person who tells somebody in the train, so like, I see your kid is rubbing against that carrier. You should put a cloth there. And I go like, please don't bother me. But I'm quite sure that this is not good. And, same with like other things kids chew on, that's something just to be aware of. And yeah, and then of course, things that rub on your skin, to also be aware of, that you have a safe first layer in between.
And that's so good.
That's fairly easy. That you can do that really easy. And of course, it's not a message that people like to hear. They want to sell a lot of stuff, but yeah.
Oh, I think it's actually, I don't know, you might be surprised. It's something that I talk about a lot is the fact that, well, rather how good it feels to do the right thing. There's a reason why influencers and other people are doing Amazon hauls. It's because the dopamine hit of buying something, and then the dopamine hit of it showing up at your door, and then the dopamine hit of putting on something new is enough to where people are spending a bunch of money, time, and sacrificing their health for it. But the opposite is also true. I try to explain to people, when you don't buy a lot, and on top of that, you buy something that is impacting your health positively and the world positively, there's no greater feeling. And so I think it just kind of, there's also on top of that, minimalistic living feels amazing. Talk about cortisol levels. Even I tell people all the time, your bedroom should never have clutter, which I'm not perfect. Don't get me wrong. I have kids, like it's messy all the time, but I know for a fact. Yeah, my office is super cluttered, but that's kind of the point, is like your place of restoration and recharging, which is typically your bedroom for most people, should not spike your cortisol levels. And it's the same with too many clothes in your closet, too many shoes, too much junk. It actually spikes your cortisol levels on a scientific level. Actually, doing less getting rid of stuff and saving up for a purchase that takes a long time actually makes you feel way better. I think
Mm.
people just need to, flip the switch in their brain of how we understand consumption, right?
Yeah.
Now, who doesn't like that are the companies.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that's who doesn't like it. Somebody like me who has no pull in the industry, no ties to any business. If we can get my next door neighbor, my mom, my sisters to start thinking this way, we inevitably have a domino effect on the market. And if we can create demand, what does that do for the manufacturers in India and Bangladesh? Can you kind of tell me?
So a lot of, if you just look at like where's most research done right now on like, occupational cancers and, health issues coming through dyeing in the production of textile, you'd find a lot of the universities that do this are in countries like India, Bangladesh, China, Vietnam, because a lot of people there see the effects, very high leukemia rates, very high occupational cancer rates. Um, this is sort of amplified of what we see here too. I mean, we have crazy infertility rates, breast cancer, all kind of things, and we often know that very high percentage is environmental chemicals, not DNA. So this is all connected, and there is a lot of research and a lot of people who are willing, they're ready to pull the trigger and do better production in China, in Bangladesh, in Pakistan. It doesn't need to be, not everything needs to be made in Germany or in Europe. It can, those countries have a lot of engineers and they see the problems and they want to do better. The problem, of course, if there's greenwashing on the other side and the consumer doesn't trust, and then maybe says, oh, I want something that's made in America or made in Germany, then those people also don't get an opportunity to do it better. And I was telling you that the textile industry is extremely sophisticated, technical, like from a technical standpoint. If you go to a technical textile trade show, it's insane. The machines that are there, the generations of ingenuity that went into making these insane machines so that, our clothes can be produced. If the market's shifting towards making things, healthier, more sustainable, there is a million trillion brain cells will be focused on making them better. And I've met a lot of people in companies that we don't work with who have also really amazing green chemistry, really good products that they can't sell to anybody right now because the big brands are saying, 1 cent more in production, it's not worth it because the consumer doesn't understand, doesn't care. Regulation doesn't require us to do it. So as slow as this trickle down effect is, but every time you choose that, you are making an effect around the world in the supply chain. And again, it's a wave. And I think right now we can really feel it's moving up, and it won't take 10 years before we have stricter regulation. I'm very sure about that. And then the companies now that are moving forward, they will be rewarded by being able to expand and becoming bigger, and with them a long supply chain of people in other countries that are also want to move into that direction.
Beautiful. And in today's world, with everything we're inundated with, I absolutely believe that trust is the major currency of today because there's so little of it. And so if you can get trust from a consumer, or if a consumer can put their trust in a business, that's a relationship that is exactly where you want to be financially, which is what I keep saying. The consumer is tired of Target. We are tired of Walmart. We are tired of Amazon. We are tired of Lululemon. They're all the same to us. They're just big corporations who don't give a rat's ass about us, our health, or the world. We're tired of it. So if we have options, even if they're more expensive, we'd rather buy less of those options because we're sick of the rest of the things. So I have no doubt that businesses like yours are going to be actually the majority in the future. A lot of people don't think about that. And a lot of people actually disagree with me on that. They can't imagine a world where the Nike isn't the company. I actually believe that Nike's time will come to an end. And I believe that Lululemon's time will come to an end if they continue down the path they're on in terms of outwardly saying, we have the R&D funds, right? We have the ability to do all this research. We have the knowledge on how garments are made. We're just choosing not to do the right thing. Personally, I believe their time will be up. I just think it's a matter of time. So I think, Michel, you're on the right side of history. I am excited to see where you guys go. Undoubtedly, it's somewhere amazing. You're already on just a most incredible path ever. So thank you for your time. This has been amazing. Where should people go who are listening and who are hooked and fascinated by what Aizome is doing?
Yeah, we have an e-commerce business. So that's a shop where we sell a few products that are made with our process, mostly bed sheets. I think we just have a test run now of shirts and a few other things. And that's on aizome-textiles.com.
Aizome, right?
Yeah,
Aizome.
textiles.com. And I hope that if they, if they like, they should subscribe to the newsletter. And we plan on doing a lot more in the future, not just on the shop, but other things as well. And we always love talking with people. So we have a chat and a phone number. And if you have any questions or any suggestions or want to work with us, we're super happy to meet great people like you. That I think, to me, that's really inspiring, and it makes it worth it to actually connect with real people that have very similar concerns than what motivates us to do our work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're going to connect with way more people who are concerned with what you're doing, because people are waking up. This is now a problem. We can't just kind of sweep under the rug or under our clothes. Like, this is, for the first time in my life, up front and center to a point where I can't ignore it. And I'm seeing that happen all around. So thank you for what you guys are doing. Michel, truly, from the bottom of my heart, you give me hope. And that's saying a lot considering where we are. So thank you for what you do.